What if your legacy is something you can choose and not necessarily what you think? I'd like to welcome Kathleen to the Design Your Legacy podcast this lovely day. Welcome, Kathleen.
Thank you so much, Angelina. I'm delighted to be here.
It's my pleasure to host you, and I believe that you are joining from the Midwest in Wisconsin, in the United States.
Right? Madison, Wisconsin. It's my original hometown.
Wonderful. Welcome. Would you
Thank
like to start us out with an icebreaker, and then we will jump into the first question?
Wonderful. Well, I'll just drop you into my life in 2014. Don't worry, I'm not going to take you all the way through till now. But it was a moment when I was living in Palo Alto, California, where it's a home of Stanford University. And my husband and I were there, and I was an assistant vice president for development. So I was working with trustees and donors to build relationships to result in meaningful gifts for the university. And my husband was starting to think about retirement because he's 12 years older. And I knew I could take early retirement at Stanford because I had a great program and we just finished these two big campaigns. So I found out my date was 4 years off. Gave us a lot of time to think about it. But here's the thing. Most of the things I thought about was, who will I be at 56 if I'm not an assistant vice president at Stanford and I don't have all these relationships anymore? And will we have enough? Will we have enough assets to do this? And we were going to be fine. But we wondered about it. And then, would I be doing enough? What would I do? And all of those questions get in the way of what matters most. And the good news is I figured out that that was the truth. And we were able to take early retirement for me. And we moved to a community we loved. And we had 4 great years before COVID hit. But also we had 4.5 great years before my husband got a pancreatic cancer diagnosis and died a few months later. And I share that because if I hadn't have figured it out, I could have said, well, if I work another 4 years, we could make so much more money and I'll be able to do all these other things. And I would never trade that money for those 4 years with my husband. And so that's kind of where I was. And one of the last things he said to me was, promise me that you will struggle to stay open to life, knowing it would be a hard journey. And that is what my road has been. That's led me to where I am today and to be with you today.
Yeah, I find that story so profoundly deep, and I appreciate the vulnerability that you're willing to share
Of
because
course.
you're not the only individual. I think you might even be the second widow on this
Ah,
podcast episode. The first
mhm.
being Michelle Hensley out of Orange County, California.
I
So
heard her episode. It was amazing
yeah,
journey.
so one of the questions I had was, what was the first pivotal moment that made you start thinking about legacy in your own life? And I would imagine that was that moment of I have everything sorted, and now what? Or who will I be in the future? Because I think
Right.
a lot of the times when we are in school, which is a very structured environment, there's a certain amount of accountability or personal agency, and then we go out into the world, and those handrails aren't there necessarily anymore.
Right. That's so true. One of the things that affected me a little bit more in thinking about my legacy, even before that moment, was the two things. One was my work in alumni and development. People were always thinking about if they were going to make a transformative gift, was this their legacy? Was
Mhm.
this going to be what would change an institution, a set of students, whatever it might be? Was that their legacy or not? And then we also worked with people actually on their estate plans. So legacy was something that was kind of always out and around our work. And then I would say the other thing was my husband had been married once before, and his first wife died at age 41. And so we talked a lot in the years that we were together about how would we think about our estate plans because we didn't have kids ourselves. And we actually did some of that in that COVID year. So it was the kind of thing of thinking about legacy as what are your assets and how do you leverage the assets that you have was the way I used to define legacy.
Which is so interesting because that was one of the themes that I wanted to bring up. In our icebreaker, you had brought up this amazing question, and I'll let you speak more about it in a moment. It was 3 words, and I don't know if I should bring it up now or not.
Go ahead.
Yeah, well, in our icebreaker, you had brought up the key question of what matters most. And I thought to myself about entrepreneurs, whether it's Elon Musk or whoever it is, they've got multiple interests, perhaps even multiple companies, because they have multiple streams of income. And sometimes that's what people will do when they become successful. They will diversify. but then they can get caught up in the shiny object syndrome. And then this
Right.
idea of what matters most of FOMO, like FOMO, like fear of
Yeah.
missing out.
Yes.
And so I think when you spoke about your husband before and making a decision regarding priorities, and
Yes.
sometimes when we get into a quiet place of asking ourselves in reflection what matters most, and then being willing to answer that question.
Right. Well, here's a great example of it. We were redoing our estate plans in early 2020, since we weren't traveling because of COVID. He wasn't sick. And he said to me, do you think we have enough that we could set up a scholarship in our lifetime so we could see students benefit from it? And I said, yes, we just have to find the right organization that will do it at the price point that works for us. And
Mhm.
so we did. And he said, I want this to be in your name only because you're the one who spent all the time working with scholarship students at Stanford. And I said, but that's such a gift to me. And he goes, well, it's what I want to do with you and for you. And it was our shared money together, but it was his idea. And if he had never asked me that and then he died, I would have been thinking, I wonder if I should set up a scholarship. Should it be in his name and my name? Should it be in my name alone? So, this notion of what matters
Mhm.
comes from having vulnerable conversations with the people that you love. And sometimes they're hard conversations. That was a little bit of an easier one in some ways, but we got the paperwork done just before he got his diagnosis. And so we were able to now every year, my friends and I who work on the scholarship, we talk about what would Michael think about this student that we've chosen. And so it's a joy, it brings joy to me.
Yeah, and I did make the comment about what a good man.
Yes,
Yeah, and I had asked you, was he always good? Was he raised well? And you said he was raised well.
he
Yeah,
was raised very well. Yes, he was,
yeah,
as
yeah.
was I. I was blessed.
I'm going to jump around a little bit in between the
Sure.
of questions
Go
and
for it.
then some of the notes from our icebreaker. And I appreciate what you had shared regarding the struggle to stay open to life, that promise that you made, because I think that it is a conscious choice, but I think it's an ongoing choice as an adult.
Yes.
Sometimes I see adults fall into their comfort zone and then they stop becoming or they stop staying what I might call intellectually or emotionally curious about life.
Right. People get stuck and they get stuck in those, I think, those very questions of they're proving themselves to be
Mm,
enough
mhm,
or they think they don't have enough. And so
mhm.
I talk about my work as being at the intersection of worthiness, wealth, and fulfillment. And here's how it works, Angelina. I'll say it as if I don't believe I'm enough in this world, I don't have enough to offer, I have whatever insecurities I have. If I don't have enough, I will never, if I am not enough, I will never believe I have enough. Because if you don't think you're enough, you can never imagine you have enough. And
Mhm,
then where does that leave you in terms of fulfillment in life?
mhm.
So realigning and understanding that you are enough is so vitally important.
Yeah, I thought that was huge because no matter somebody's net worth, they could still buy into a belief. And I think I had responded to you also in our icebreaker that lack of self worth or the confidence piece is what slows down or causes an individual to procrastinate in the designing and planning of their legacy. And it is
Yes,
money independent.
right. Right. That's very true. I say to people I work with, wealth is a number. It is a number on a financial report. Abundance is a mindset. And when you can embrace that you have enough, you are enough, that abundance mindset allows you to really live in alignment with what matters most and grounded in your values. You have to get really clear about your values.
Yeah, we're going to speak about values in a moment. So I know that
Sure.
in our intention for today, our episode today, we're thinking about legacy as, what if your legacy is something you can choose and not necessarily what you think. And many times people can think about their legacy not just in terms of death or taxes, but also accomplishments, impact, and they
Yes.
forget that perhaps how they model self worth or how they model what you would refer to as being enough is even something that they pass forward in mindset to the next generation or those who
Right.
are watching them.
Right. So for some people, when I worked at Stanford, I worked with families where the students were at Stanford, and sometimes for some families, you could sense that someone's self-worth was tied up in whether their child got in or not.
Oh, that is the
It-
truth. Sure.
oh, isn't it the truth, right? As compared to, and then what does that do to the child?
Well, it's
Like if
conditional
I
love.
don't get in, then mom isn't going to feel good about herself or about me,
Well, it's
right?
performance based.
So performance based.
And then that's what they live into their entire lives. That's all they know. And that's what they
Yes.
think that love is.
Right. And it's not, it's about love, right? And I think about legacy. Mary Oliver, the poet, has an epic poem, The Summer Day, and I love the last two lines. Oftentimes people only quote the last line, but she says, "Doesn't everything die at last and too soon? Tell me, what is it you're going to do with your one wild and precious life? And is it going to be imposing your self-worth being fulfilled by someone else, or
Mhm.
understanding who you are, your wholeness, your workaholic nature and your laziness all together at once, right? And saying, that's who I am. Some days I'm this, some days I'm that."
Yeah. So I just wanted to shine a flashlight on what you shared and that, and you're right. I only knew the last line of that poem.
Yes.
I didn't know the
Yes.
line before it, that most
Hmm.
people only quote the last line. But there is something about legacy that there is an element of what it is we do. Like you spoke about the
Of
scholarships and
course.
taking actions, but there's also what you're speaking about is who we be. Like if you say to someone, who I am is enough and who I be is enough, and you hold the space for that, then someone can look across the table or the room, and you've just set an example that whether or not someone gets into Stanford or whatever that performance metric is, that key
Right.
performance indicator,
Yes.
that them being who they be in their one wild precious life is
Right.
enough, even if they don't make the medal for gold.
Exactly right. And I will say there were many, many families who were very understanding about that, but you could just sense the hurt for some families where it was like, my grandfather went there, I went there, my child has to go there.
Mm,
No, there's a lot of great places to go, right?
yeah,
And so it's tied up in who I am, and there's a boundary that you can set or that your child can set. There's some people whose kids didn't apply, and they
sure.
were like, so all of those things become the boundaries that we live with in life, and those are what set us free when you can actually say, this is what I'm going to choose about my legacy. My legacy is about love and family. But the Maya Angelou quote is truly the best. Oprah said to her, "My school in Africa, that's going to be my legacy." And Maya looked at her and said, "No, no, you don't know your legacy. Your legacy is every life you touch."
Ooh, that's good. That's good.
And I would extend that it's then and every life that person touches. So how I am with an employee or how I am with a relative
Mm,
affects how they will be with the next person they interact with.
mm.
So that kindness, even when you have to talk about hard things, that notion of being kind and clear is so important.
Yeah. I think one of the things also, and I'm going to move on to the next
Yes.
question in a moment.
Yes.
I think one of the things you're also speaking into is status. If you get into Stanford or whatever that thing is, then not only do you represent the family well, then you look good, then you make it into some invisible club. And I think you're raising the question of what if you're still whole, even if you don't get into the club? What if you
Right.
still can have one wild, precious, amazing life that impacts others, like Maya Angelou says, and you don't
Yes.
have the name attached to your identity?
Right. The child who wants to become an artist and not a doctor,
Mm, hmm. Yeah.
right? There's
Well,
so many people that if you ask them, what is it, what was the major you would have chosen if you could have done anything?
oh, yeah.
It's
Not the
sometimes not
moneymaker.
what they did.
Yeah. Okay. I know that you have recently
Mhm.
wrote in a book and it is published, and you'll probably hold it up in a moment. So, in terms of storytelling and writing, as an author, how do you see writing as a vehicle for capturing and transmitting legacy, as well as your ideas around alignment to existing and future generations?
Thank you. I will. This is the book. It's called Infinite Impact Stories of Alignment. I'm a featured author in it. There are 12 of us in the book. And it came from this concept that uh, a, a book launch expert, Amber Villauer, wrote the book Infinite Impact. And she was called to it because she said, all the authors I worked with, so many of them were not in alignment. Once their book came out, they didn't know how to manage what came next. And so she wanted to write how to get in alignment so that you are living the life you are meant to live, which means really understanding who are you meant to serve? What is your purpose? Why do you do this? Why do you get up every day and do this? And then what are your values that are your guardrails that keep you in alignment? So
Mm-hmm.
the joy of writing this,
Mm-hmm.
because I was never going to, this was not me. I wasn't going to write in a book.
Mm-hmm.
I, as a leader at Stanford, we always talked about the institution. It was never about me, the person.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was very interesting to write 2,000 words about my life. It was a very different experience, but I think it's informative to people because I talk about this notion of my life before and after alignment. And what happened was I had come up with this new idea for my business and I couldn't tell anybody about it. I was frozen.
Mm-hmm.
And I tried to write website copy, but I wouldn't talk to anybody about it. And
Mm-hmm.
what I realized through the alignment process was I had spent so much time internally trying to prove myself that I didn't understand how to promote myself. And this notion of getting in alignment is what really helped me. And my values are the real driver. So my purpose is I am here to help accomplished people feel grounded, free, and fulfilled through the coaching work that I do. Grounded, free, and fulfilled. And I do that. My why is because it brings joy to them and to me. And then my values are very simply to keep wholeness in myself, that I'm always working to be the best version of me,
Mm-hmm.
and that I live courageously. Here I am on your podcast. I
I think it's
connect,
wonderful. Yes.
I connect open-heartedly, and I deliver impact. And the
Yes.
fifth one is in my life for my own social justice is to elevate decency and justice in the world. So that those are my guardrails. So I don't take on things that don't serve my purpose
Mm-hmm.
because I know who it is I'm meant to serve. You write an avatar, you write a story of an imaginary person of who you're meant to serve in that process. And so that's all captured in the book.
Yeah, I think it's wonderful. I was thinking that of even naming this episode "Getting into Alignment for Your Legacy" or something along those lines.
Yes,
Right?
yes,
Yeah. Okay.
yes.
Yeah.
Aligning with what matters most, truly.
Yeah, I think it is. It's a true gift because if someone again isn't pulled in five different directions because they feel like they have to please someone, and maybe pleasing someone could be professional associates, their family of origin, their spouse, their
Do you
someone.
do you sell your business? Do you stay in your business? Do you
Mhm,
promote someone and step out of the business?
mhm,
All of those things are decision-making questions. And what I offer is that there are three questions I'll offer people about aligned decision making. And one of them is, does this choice align with the world I want to create? Does
yeah.
this opportunity align with who I am at my core? And am I making these decisions from conviction or people pleasing? Well, you have to be able to answer what's the world you want to create? And am I willing to do things that might go against what others want of me? But I know who I am. So until you answer those questions, it's hard to answer the questions about choices that you face in your life. And it becomes much easier when you're aligned with what matters most.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just thinking that the Twitter X moment is when you raise that question of what is the world that I want to create? Because
Yes.
sometimes we think that we're a tiny, just, particle of dust in this world of billions of people. And yet, not only can we vote with our pocketbook, but we can also vote with our energy.
Yes. Yes.
Like, I'm not going to make that decision today, or I'm going to break that pattern, or I'm going to do something different.
Absolutely. The woman who is my mentor, and I just adore her, Nancy Levin, who trained me in my coaching program, called and said, would you be willing to be a mentor in training the next class of coaches?
Mm.
And I thought 2 years ago, it would have been, she wants me. She wants me. Right.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
after having gone through alignment, I said, you know what, Nancy? And having been trained boundaries by her, I said, this doesn't fit into what I'm trying to accomplish. It will take me away from what is my true mission. And I did not apologize. I did not make excuses. And she just looked at me and said, I'm so proud of you. She said, I'm sorry you're not going to do it, but I'm so proud of how easily you were able to make the decision.
Yeah, and trusting yourself.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's one of the things I think also I'm going to blend it into legacy coaching and advisory work for a second. There's something about trusting oneself, trusting the process, and knowing that that is possible, even if you can't see the guardrails.
Right.
because
Right.
we weren't trained at the dining room table per se, or the kitchen table, or our holiday meals of, oh, you're going to have a legacy. Because again, sometimes people associate that with ego, and it's not necessarily about ego. It's about creating a vision and then being willing to develop it based on values and
Right.
executing it month after month, week after week.
Right.
And that requires some self-trust, and that's what you just spoke of.
And that's why my vision is not that I will coach 500 people in the next 10 years. My vision is that I help people feel grounded, free, and fulfilled. I can do that every day.
Mhm.
It isn't about some number that's out there.
Yeah. Okay. Very cool. Okay. Well, let's talk about patterns for a moment. So, when you're working with clients, what
Mhm.
patterns do you notice about their fears, their hesitations of that they might have around that question of what matters most regarding even
Yes,
their worthiness and the idea even that they could align?
absolutely. I think what's really beautiful about what I get to do is I get to create a space where someone is everything okay?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Oh, okay. Um, what's really wonderful about what I get to do is I get to create a space where people can speak their truth.
Hmm.
That, especially when people are very accomplished, who do you talk to about the things that you struggle with?
Hmm.
And so, what I am able to hear are the fears that they have, like, well, I can't leave this job. Tell me more. Well, I have a family to protect. Do you think that that will be a problem? Yes. What makes you think that? Well, my dad lost his job.
Oh, this
Well,
is good. You're peeling the onion. Keep going.
yes, you just keep going. Well, my
Hmm.
dad lost his job when I was young. What impact did that have on you? I listened to my parents talk about money. Are you in that position now?
Hmm.
Well, no. Do you have more in relation to your parents? Oh gosh, way more. Yes, of
Hmm.
course. Well, it lives in your body, that fear, that hearing those conversations about money with your parents, it lives in your body. And so your notion of, I'd really like to leave this job, but I can't because I have to stay.
Hmm.
And when they can finally see the source of that thinking, they might still stay in the job. But what really happens is then they choose to stay in the job.
Hmm.
And stepping into a role, staying in a role when it's your choice and not this thing put on you because you're so afraid that you might, lose your house, it becomes very different. You make choices and then you come to work less burdened and more empowered
Yes, and more present.
and more present, absolutely more present.
Yeah, I think one of the things is, and you might know this, and to all the listeners out there and our viewers, there's something about holding space for somebody to get off their chest what they need to say. I think people have a lot to say. They're just waiting for a space that's safe enough with an individual enough that they can say eight layers of the onion. And I think one of the deeper truths that you pointed to is regarding the fear that lives in their body. So if they're carrying something and they've been carrying it for years and decades, and
They
they
don't even know it anymore.
because
It's
it's
just, it's within them, but they don't know it up here.
well, it's become normalized, and then you bring it up and out into the open, to the surface, and then you give them that choice of, well, now what would you like to do with it, if you want to do anything, if you want to do anything with it at all,
Right.
because now you have a choice. You're not the baby elephant tied to the fork in the ground.
Right. And so it's about uh, rewriting beliefs, old
Mm-hmm.
limiting beliefs, and
Mm-hmm.
rewriting new empowering beliefs. But
Mm-hmm.
then, just like going to the gym, you have to have the muscle to take action on the new empowering belief because it's
and,
very easy to slip back.
and to stay with it.
Right. So we
Yeah.
talk about what is the action you're going to take
Yeah.
so that they can feel like, okay, yes, I can live differently.
Yeah, what I think is interesting about that is also that you remind them that they have choice, because people forget that. Like when you talked about, people oftentimes can feel stuck.
Right.
No matter their net worth, they can feel stuck, trapped.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's about setting boundaries. Boundaries really do set you free
Hmm.
uh, to be who you want to be. So boundaries are really just about the the space between two people and how you put a separation between the two of us. There's a
Hmm.
boundary here between the two of us.
Hmm.
It's really what I will or will not do or tolerate or accept.
Hmm.
That is the definition of how I talk about boundaries with my clients. And I don't. if I say I will not accept talking about my late husband and you try to talk about him, it's not that you're crossing my boundary. It's that I just start telling you things because I feel like I have to because you asked, as compared to me saying, gosh, Angelina, that's not really something I'd like to talk about today. Right? So I set my boundary,
Hmm.
but so many people think, well, now I have to because she brought it up and I don't want to.
Hmm.
Right. So that's what boundaries do is it allows you to say, I will or will not tolerate or do or accept something. And
Hmm.
when you can create those boundaries, it allows you, especially with people with wealth, to say, oh, you're selling a table for a fundraiser that you're doing. Well, that topic is not a topic of interest to me. I would prefer not to buy a table.
That's a tough conversation because there's threads and underlying currents regarding guilt, obligation,
Oh,
entitlement of all
yes.
the parties in that
Fear
conversation.
of loss of relationship, all those things.
Yeah, maintaining image, maintaining
Right.
relationships. Because under,
But
yeah.
Angelina, that's really important to you. I'll make a gift to the, SPCA,
Hmm.
but I'm not an animal person. But I'll make a gift in honor of you, but I don't want to buy a table because I don't like galas. That's such a
Hmm.
simple, but it's so fraught, right? It is such a fraught thing.
Yeah. One of the things that's also interesting about the subject of legacy, and we may have talked about this in the icebreaker, is about two-thirds of today's affluent are self-made, and that number is increasing. So I bring that up because do we know how to say no? Oprah was somebody who was self-made, and so I think when it comes to women, probably more women are going to inherit wealth than become self-made with their wealth. But having said that, Oprah one time brought up that when she started to become successful and money started to come in, she was what she called the first national bank of her family because everyone had their
Yes.
hand out. And then how do you
Yes.
say no? And I think that's also what you're referring to regarding fears, hesitations, patterns. How do you break
Right.
a pattern if you've not been given the playbook?
Right. And so that is where the alignment piece really helps because you get to say, this is what I'm focused on,
Hmm.
right? I'm going to focus on like my Elevate Decency and Justice. I do work on homelessness issues. I do work on civil rights issues. I'm not interested in doing things in another space. I love the arts, but
Hmm.
I'm not as interested in healthcare issues, although I made a gift to the hospital when Michael died because of something they had done. But it's not the space I'm going to stay in. Or the pancreatic cancer people wanted me to get really involved. And I'm like, that's not my life. It was 4 months. No, thank you. Right. So it's being able to say, what is it that matters as
Hmm.
compared to, oh, I must do something for all of these things.
Yeah. Yeah. And save some energy for
Not, you get to
yourself.
choose.
Yeah. I think it's huge, especially when I think about women again that are going to be inheriting money and
Yes.
wealth. I think about even Mackenzie Scott, who used to be married to Jeff Bezos,
Right.
because Jeff Bezos is a more household common name that people are aware of because of Amazon. But I remember that she went to a consulting firm. I can't think of their name right now. I think it's the Bridge Span, something Bridge.
Mhm.
But anyways, she had a team around her. So she went to the nonprofits and she went to the organizations. She didn't allow anyone to come to her. But not
Right.
everyone, will know how to navigate that world regarding them feeling like a marker or target if they do have something to give of their time
Exactly. So
and
some
talent.
people choose to say, I'll only do things anonymously so no one will know.
Mm-hmm.
Some people will say, I'm going to make the choices. You can't come to me.
Mm-hmm.
Mrs. Joan Kroc, Ray Kroc, from founder of McDonald's, she was
Mm-hmm.
the same way. You could not approach her.
Mm-hmm.
She decided on the things she wanted to do. So you had to kind of find. I worked on something that resulted in her making a gift to the University of San Diego, but it was through her decision that she wanted to support our new woman president.
Mm-hmm.
And so she called her and said, how do I support you? And
Yeah.
went through a couple of things and they built this wonderful relationship. And in the end, she left a part of her estate gift for a peace institute at the university. And
Very
San Diego was the county of her residence. So it made sense.
It's very cool. I want to
Yeah.
bring up another quote tied to this, and then we'll go on to the next
Yes.
question. Lorenzo de Medici has a home in Los Angeles County, and there's a quote on his website because an associate of mine knows him. I've never spoken to him, but the quote said something along the lines of, if you know anything about the Medici family, it's a banking family out of Italy, it
Mhm.
said something along the lines of, and I'm paraphrasing, I will give you the world, just don't ask me.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. And very often, the other one is there's a proverb that I think someone told me is a Chinese proverb of the best way to draw someone closer is to ask them to do a favor. So it's sometimes it's asking someone to volunteer,
Mm,
or would you host something in your home, or whatever it might be, that you start to build the connection. And suddenly they look at the leader of the institution and say, how can I help you? I just can't believe I haven't helped you. What could I do that would be useful for you?
yeah.
And so it isn't always that I come to you and ask you for something, but I engage you in the life of the institution and see what matters to you.
Very cool.
I
Very
think,
cool.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk about values in action. Legacy
Yes.
is often tied to values. In fact, I refer to it as the three or four legs to a chair or a stool that then supports the focus. Okay, so in your coaching and consulting and working with individuals these days now, after being a development officer at a university,
Mhm.
how do you help people identify their true values and then align their actions with them?
Well, since I've done this alignment work, I actually take people through the alignment process. So to get them in alignment, to have them really write the story of who are they most meant to serve in the world and what is their purpose, and getting really clear on what their purpose is.
Mhm.
And then that real question of why do you do this? What does it bring you? I used to say, before I went through alignment, I used to say, oh, it's not about me. It's about my clients. Their wins are my wins. That's my why.
Mhm.
And Amber, who wrote the book, looked at me and she said, Kathleen, is that why you get up every morning, is so they win? And I said, no, it's because it brings me joy. And she said, right. That's why you do this. You want that person to experience joy, and you also need joy in your life. That is my unmet need, is to have great
Oh,
joy in my life.
yeah.
And so that's why I do it. So this is the process I take them through. And then I say, but now it's very easy to slip out of alignment, right? Um, uh,
A triggering phone call, an email
right,
with,
exactly.
yeah.
Someone asks me to be on the board of my homeowners association. No, thank you. Thank you very much, but no, thank you. Or to serve in some capacity because it was something my late husband had done.
Yeah, and now you
Well,
got to wave to your neighbors as you pick up the morning paper from the driveway.
I know, exactly, exactly. But so these values become guardrails.
Mm,
And I
hmm.
said to Amber, she said, what made you decide to write a chapter in the book? I said, because you made me write these values. And
Hmm.
how can my values are demanding me to be visible. I did not want to be visible, but my values demanded I be visible.
Yeah,
Live
that's great.
courageously, connect open-heartedly, deliver impact. That's kind of a clear demand.
Yeah, well, I think it's interesting. One of the things I also shared with you in our icebreaker is that it's very hard for me to get women to speak on this podcast because
Ah,
either they're holding their cards close to their chest or um, men more so in society are expected to provide and protect and hunt the deer, etc. And maybe women just don't want to be the taller blade of grass to say, "Oh, I am designing my legacy." So I think it's interesting that you said values demand visibility because I've also sat in rooms in business meetings where the males will speak and the women will be like wallflowers and they won't say anything. And they're just as smart, but
oh,
again, they're
yes.
holding their cards close to their chest. And I'm not sure if that's cultural completely these days in 2025, if that's generational.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it's generational. This was the moment when I realized this work of Embrace Your Abundance was something I needed to do. I gave a talk at a hospital in Oregon, and I was talking to a group of 75 women. And this one woman in the audience, sitting there beautiful in her black dress and her pearls, probably in her late 70s. And she said, I told this story of a woman who had been a washerwoman in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, African American. She ended up having $250,000 toward the end of her life when she was 86 and trying to decide what to do with it. And the lawyers were saying percentages and all this stuff. And the banker said, I'm going to give you 10 times, and I want you to put them across these cards where you've written who you want to have benefit. So I thought, will they identify with her? No. But this woman raised her hand and said, those 10 dimes matter. And I said, tell me why. She said, well, my husband wants them all to go to our children. And I said, well, that's probably not an unusual story. I said, but why? What made you speak up? She said, well, I would like two of them for myself. And I said, really? Tell me, what would you do? She goes, well, then I would decide. And I said, and why does that matter? She goes, because then, and she started to pound right here, then my grandchildren will know what mattered to me.
Oh, that's
But
awesome.
oh my goodness, I need to do this work because I think generationally, this was 5 years ago. She's probably in her 80s now.
Hmm.
Generationally, she had less of a voice. She probably didn't get to decide the money in her family,
Yes,
right? Her husband
sure.
probably decided all of it.
Well, absolutely. I have talked with women and they're still alive today. They're in their 80s, but they were unable to get a mortgage at the bank or the bank had to
Correct.
make an exception.
Yes, that was the generation. And so then what are the stories and the feelings and those bodies communicating to their own daughters?
Hmm.
Some is you got to do everything. You've got to work hard. You can do anything you want. I could
Hmm.
have, but the world wouldn't let me. And
Hmm.
others are saying you have to stay within this box,
Hmm.
right? So it depends on how that person chose to express it in the next generation in their legacy.
Yeah, in
Yeah.
the yeah, and the empowerment of
Yes.
yeah, like what
Oh, it was
choices.
in our family, math. I was to learn math. There was no question about that. And I had one of my dearest friends was her father told her, "You don't need to learn math, you'll get married."
Woo!
And we were the same age, right?
Yeah. Although
Yeah.
women are amazing at balancing checkbooks, and that's where math matters.
And running businesses
Sure, and they keep the
and
books many times, even in
right.
commercial real estate. They
And
would have.
founding businesses and leading institutions and running countries in some countries, right?
Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, how
Yes.
nice. Very
Yes.
cool. Thank you for sharing that story because I think that, especially when it comes to roots and heritage, I think it matters so people don't, and I'm going to be careful when I say this metaphor, but that so that people don't become like a floating balloon in this world, kind of just lost with whatever direction the wind goes.
Right. And that's where having these values as your guardrails to
Mm-hmm.
keep you aligned with what matters most
Mm-hmm.
really helps, especially in turbulent times. If
Mm-hmm.
there's a traumatic thing that happens in the family,
Mm-hmm.
what are we going to do? And that's where the other part of my work is around grief. I became a certified grief expert. And one of the things that lives in our body is unresolved grief.
Oh, interesting.
Yes, my husband was an English major, and he said at the heart of every great story is unresolved grief.
I don't know if many people realize that. I think a lot of times people think about how trauma can live in their body, PTSD,
Yes.
if they choose to not transition over on the bridge of post traumatic growth. But I don't know how
Yes.
many people realize that grief could live in their
Oh,
body.
grief lives in your body. Absolutely. And that the stages of grief, everyone thinks, oh, first anniversary, they're not going to ask you again.
Mm. Mm.
Or a couple years in, and I'm still talking about Michael. And some people just look at me like, why are you still talking about him? And David Kessler, who's the grief expert with whom I work, grief.com, uh, David would say to people ask me, when is my friend going to stop talking about her dead husband? And he
Mm.
looks at them and says, how long will he be dead?
Ooh, that's a good question with a question right there.
Yes, exactly. And so grief becomes a real driver. And if you don't process your grief, I mean, they say that he talks about how there's research that the buffalo, when a storm comes at buffalo, they run through it.
Oh,
They just
interesting.
go right into the storm. So they get to the other side.
Well, and that's what we're supposed to do, but instead we
But
freeze and
instead,
hide.
people push the emotions down.
Mm.
And just like a ball in water, when you try to push a ball down in water, it pops back up.
Yeah.
And it pops up as anger or illness or depression, right? Grief does not have to be about depression. Yes, it can be about sadness and loneliness and all of those things, but
Hmm.
it's the witnessing of grief. It's you coming and sitting next to me and saying, how are you today? Not, let me tell you about what it was like when my cat died,
Or let me fix
which
you.
some, yeah, or let me fix you. You have to
Yeah.
get better. Why don't you start dating?
I know that's like putting the band-aid and you're like, I didn't want a
No.
band-aid. Just sit next to me on the sidewalk for
Yes,
10 hours.
exactly. There's an excellent children's book called The Rabbit Listened. I won't go into the story, but it's a grief story for kids, but it
Mhm.
works for adults and it's called The Rabbit Listened.
Yeah, that's great. I'll share this and I'm going to move on to the next question. I
Yes.
had a platonic BFF, best friend forever. I know that's such
Yes.
a
Yes. I
kid
love that.
acronym BFF, like hello,
I
how
love
close are
it.
we? Yeah, he passed away from cancer in 2010, but I still look for him in a crowd of people.
What
Yeah,
was his name?
his name was Kirby.
Kirby.
Yeah, it's and one of my sister's friends who lives in South Africa. He joked with me. He was like, "Oh, it's like a Where's Waldo book. You're still looking for Waldo." I was like, "Thank
Oh, it's
you."
so true. It happened to me not that long ago, that same kind of experience. But they
Oh,
are present in your lives, right?
well, you
How
just
many
don't.
decisions you make that you think, I mean, I said to Michael, how will I make decisions? And he said, you will know what I think. He goes, you've known
Hmm.
me for so long. You know what I think.
Hmm.
And so if I'm trying to make a decision, I think, Michael, what would you say? And I'm like, well, I know what you'd say. And sometimes I go with it and sometimes I don't, you know?
Hmm. Hmm.
But you know what Kirby would tell you,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
Okay. In terms of resilience, are there any
Yes.
other challenges you might like to share regarding your own life and how those challenges shape the way you think about creating a meaningful, lasting legacy?
Yes. Resilience is such a gift because resilience requires, in my view, it requires vulnerability. It requires courage. I said to people I could have stayed in Ashland, Oregon, where we were living and the theater that we loved, and I could have become the little old lady that said, this place is never the same as when Michael was here, and instead I said, we hadn't lived there long enough to have a strong friend base. I came and visited Madison, where my hometown, and I say, I'm bubble wrapped in love here. There are so many people in my life. And so I have this vibrant life, but it took me really processing the grief and processing the stories and thinking about what will make me resilient and choosing to go through grief counseling, choosing to do some new line of coaching through Nancy Levin, where I've reached a very different level, finding the alignment work with Amber.
Hmm.
All of that have been stages. I'm now speaking on public stages. These are all things I would not have been doing before.
Hmm.
But the resilience is, if not that, what?
Mm.
If I didn't do that, what would I be doing? I'd be sure. I love going to the women's volleyball games here in Madison. I love going to theater. I could just go and experience things. But for me right now, that's not enough.
I think it's great. I think you're still challenging yourself to
Yes.
not settle. Like my
Yes.
life isn't done. My life is just it's just pivoted. Which
Right. At 63, who would have said some 63-year-old is going to say, sure, I'll write a chapter in a book.
right? But it's a new
Right.
door to open, and you were willing courageously enough
Yes.
to open up that door.
Yes. So resilience is to me about courage and vulnerability and making sure you have the people around you in your life that
Hmm.
you can talk to,
Hmm.
that you can call on when you say, is this going to work for me? And there have been many stories in these last 5 years of people who have been champions for me, whose shoulders I stand on.
Yeah, that's so
And my
awesome.
sister is a really big one of them. She's my best. She talk about BFF. She's my best.
Cool. Very cool. If we run over a few minutes, is that all right?
Sure.
Okay, wonderful. Because I know I was fashionably late. Okay. So,
Yes.
how do
Excellent.
you encourage people to shift from scarcity to wholeness? And, whether this is mindset, their resources. And one of the things I know that coaching speaks about isn't just resources on the outside, it's also resourcefulness on the inside. So, again, how do you shift someone that you're talking to from that space of scarcity over to wholeness?
Thank you. Uh, I think what's interesting is people don't see themselves as being stuck in a scarcity mindset. They say, well, I can't do that because, or they'll say a number of different statements, or that will never work for me.
So there's a storm outside. So we're just going to go on to the next question as tech happens, technology these days in the face of weather. Okay, so let me bring our conversation back to practical tools. So for someone listening today that's never thought about alignment or abundance, that it could be possible for their life's legacy, because again, we weren't raised to be talking about this at our dining room table, our kitchen table, or even holiday meals. So what's a first simple step that someone could take out there?
Well, the first step is to make the choice that you want to make a change and that you are willing to acknowledge that the life you're living does not equal what matters most for you at the moment. that something is off. And the analogy is you're driving with the parking brake on, right? And all of a sudden you release the parking brake and you still have to steer and navigate, but you're driving, right? So if you have that sense that something like the parking brake is holding you back and you want to make a choice to make a change, that is the very simple first step. Not so simple, but the easiest. Then getting in alignment is the next step to really get clear on who you're meant to serve in this world, whether that's through your business, through volunteerism, through your family, whatever it might be. Who are you meant to serve? And what is your purpose and your why? And
Mhm.
what are your values? And
Mhm.
you can do that by going to getinalignment.com, and you can do it through a workbook exercise. You can hire a certified guide. You can do it a number of different ways, but getting in alignment really helps people, because then all of those questions I was giving before of like, is this choice about my legacy, about our estate? Is it creating the world I want?
Mhm.
So like Warren Buffett didn't give all of his money to his kids
Mhm.
because he said they just won the lottery, right? So people don't want to create people who have too much without a purpose.
Mhm.
So people will choose to give their money away in different ways and not all of it to their family, or they'll choose to have a family foundation and engage the family. So
Mhm.
what is it that you want? Do you want well-informed next generations, rising generations, as Jay Hughes likes to say, right? The rising generation is engaged in the process. What is
Mhm.
it that you want?
That's brilliant. Thank you for speaking into that because I think it is a simple step. It is a choice. Legacy does not have to be complicated. It doesn't have to be tied to ego per se, and it isn't
No,
just for the rich or famous.
it's just what matters most. And are you living in alignment with that? And if you're not, you can get there.
Wonderful, wonderful. Okay, since this is a legacy podcast,
Yes.
1 to 2 sentences. What would you like your holistic legacy to be?
Mine,
Yes,
my legacy,
this is where you get to put the stake in the ground.
right. My legacy is not only the love I have for my family and my friends, my legacy is also the work at Stanford that I did, and that I helped raise money for scholarships and buildings and things. And there are now people who are doing research on health issues because of these opportunities. And I was a part of that story. So
Mhm.
I take some gratitude in that, of having been a part of that. But then there's my own philanthropic journey, the scholarship we set up,
Mhm.
and then where our money will go after I'm gone. But the legacy is living every day in a kind way where I seek that joy so that I leave people feeling grounded, free, and fulfilled. That is my purpose.
Yeah, that's so lovely, especially because it's in service to others.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, that's very, very nice. If you were to set aside a weekend or two in the next year, a weekend or two a month in the next year to design your hardcover coffee table book for your legacy, because oftentimes I see hardcover coffee table books of architects or fashion designers, etc. But then where is the book regarding our legacy? Is our legacy not also worth having on our coffee table, to
Yes.
memorialize?
Well,
Yeah,
it's
what would
funny that you ask that, because I feel like I was just talking to my sister today and planning that very idea. We're having a family reunion of my mom's siblings and then the generations down. And I was working on creating the family trees so
yeah.
everyone would understand where we came from and then who's coming along. And we're going to create a book
Hmm.
about my mom and dad and the family, because two people loved. There
Yeah.
are 50 of us, including spouses and everybody, but all the next generations down. And so for me, it's about the joy of connection,
Mm.
that people are connected, that they have a sense of belonging, and they have a sense of purpose and impact in their lives.
Hmm.
So mine would be rich with visuals of that.
Hmm. Oh, that's wonderful. That's
Yeah.
wonderful. Yeah, I think it's also very grounding again to know one's roots. No matter how unique one's family might be, that is still something where you can learn the best from them, you learn the most
Yes.
from them, all of that. And
Yes.
how you made some, how you carried certain traditions on and how you may have changed some traditions going
Right,
forward.
exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah. What's a good website for the book or if somebody wanted to learn more about you?
To learn more about me, it's KathleenAQuinn.com. And to learn more about the book, you can go to my website or you can go to getinalignment.com. And that will take you to the book as well. And it's available for pre-order now, but will be out on September 9th. Thank you for letting me share that.
It's my pleasure. I wanted to circle back to the beginning of our conversation today. We set the intention around what if your legacy is something you can choose and not necessarily what you think. And I believe we have fulfilled that business promise today. Some of the
Good.
key points that we touched upon was about this idea of um, do you have to prove yourself? And this idea of what matters most and answering
Right.
that question. And I think the answer is what matters most to you, not necessarily to
Right.
those around you,
Yes.
in terms of integrity of your own self actualization. And also, you brought up some amazing key points regarding, um, who are you meant to serve, but also getting clear on purpose and the idea that fear can live in our body just as unresolved grief can live in our body. And we don't
Yeah.
necessarily realize it, but allowing that energy and emotion to be brought to the surface, those feelings, then
Okay.
can set us free to make more informed choices, decisions that have more consciousness around them in this
Yes.
one precious, wild, and beautiful life.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for being a guest. It's been my pleasure to host you. I am working offsite, like I shared with you today. So I
Yes.
will just close our conversation out by saying to any of the listeners or viewers out there that if you have liked what we have chatted about today, please remember to rate and review, share with your family and friends. If you feel so inclined, send an email or a phone call, reach out to either Kathleen or myself and let us know your thoughts about today's conversation, how it may have impacted you. We're always happy to receive emails or phone calls. And so thank you so much for joining us. And thank you to Kathleen for speaking into your.
Thank you very much for what you're doing. It's an important mission in this world.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you to the listeners. All right, bye-bye.
Thank you.